As I stood on the dock, gazing out at the serene waters of Sullivan Lake, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The letter in my hand was like a ticking time bomb, threatening to disrupt the peaceful life I'd built here. The Maple Creek Estates Homeowners Association was demanding that I remove my boat from the lake, citing aesthetic standards and community guidelines that I'd never been aware of. I'd inherited this lake from my grandfather, a commercial fisherman turned conservationist who'd spent his life fighting to protect this very water. He'd always taught me that water is life, not just for fish, but for all of us. I remembered his words like they were etched in stone. Never let anyone tell you that profit is more important than protecting what nature gave us. As I looked out at the lake, I felt a surge of anger and determination. These HOA bureaucrats had no idea who they were messing with. They'd been using my family's lake for years, without permission, and now they were trying to dictate terms to me on my own property? It was laughable. I took a deep breath and decided to confront them head-on. I called my friend, Alex Chun, an environmental lawyer who'd helped me navigate the complexities of water rights and land use issues. "Alex, I need your expertise," I said, explaining the situation. Alex listened intently, his voice firm and reassuring. "Don't worry, Jake. We'll take care of this. But first, let's gather some evidence. I'll come up to the lake tomorrow, and we'll review your documents together." I smiled, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. With Alex on my side, I knew we could take on the HOA and protect my family's legacy. But little did I know, this was just the beginning of a battle that would test my resolve, my wits, and my determination to stand up for what was rightfully mine. As I waited for Alex's arrival, I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. The HOA's demand seemed suspiciously timed, and I wondered if there was more to their story than met the eye. I decided to do some digging of my own, scouring the internet for any information about the HOA's activities on the lake. What I found would blow the lid off the whole scandal. As I watched the sun dip below the horizon, casting an orange glow over the tranquil waters of Sullivan Lake, my phone buzzed with a new email notification from the HOA. The subject line made my heart race. Final notice, non-compliant watercraft. They had escalated the situation, and I couldn't help but feel a prickling sense of urgency. Pulling out my laptop, I quickly scanned the contents of the email. "Jake Sullivan, we have decided to impose a fine of $1,000 due to your failure to comply with community standards regarding your boat. If it is not removed within 48 hours, we will pursue further legal action." The audacity of these people was infuriating. In their world, they held all the cards, but they clearly didn't know the game I was willing to play. I grabbed my phone and dialed Alex. "We just crossed the line. They're coming after my boat now, and I need your help. Fast." "What do you have?" Alex asked, his voice calm despite the situation. "I'm gathering everything. I found evidence they've been using my property for their fishing tournaments without asking. I need you to come, and we'll file an injunction before they take any further steps." "Okay, I'll move quickly. But don't take any drastic action yet. I want to gather as much as we can first." Just as I hung up, a movement caught my eye. A figure was lurking near the edge of my property, barely visible behind the trees. My heart raced again, adrenaline surging as I edged closer to the dock, relying on the fading light to conceal my approach. I crept toward the noise, each step cautious as I tried to get a better look. I could see a man in a dark hoodie, kneeling down by the water's edge. What was he doing? Was he trying to tamper with my boat? I felt the heat of anger rise within me. "Hey!" I shouted, lunging forward. The figure jerked up, startled, then turned to face me. It was Gerald Thompson, the president of the Elite Anglers Club, my neighbor's supposed representative, and more importantly, their instigator. "What are you doing here, Gerald?" I demanded, half angry and half bewildered. "Jake," he replied, his voice surprisingly calm, his hands raised. "I'm just checking something out." "Checking what? Why are you on my property after the chaos you caused at the tournament?" He hesitated, shifting his weight between feet, eyes darting around as if looking for an escape. "I thought we could settle things, okay? The HOA might want to negotiate." "Negotiate?" I scoffed, stepping closer. "You mean after trying to steal from me?" That doesn't sound like negotiations to me. He drew a deep breath, frustration coloring his expression. Look, I know Richard's been pushing things too far. The HOA overstepped. You have a right to be angry, but we're all part of the same community here. I felt the simmering tension coiling between us. You think this is about community? You've been using my lake without permission, holding your tournaments like it's some kind of playground for you. I didn't know it was going to blow up like this, Gerald protested. I thought it was fine. I thought the HOA had it sorted with you. A sliver of doubt lingered in his tone. Was this an act, or was he genuinely in over his head? I sensed an opportunity. What else don't you know, Gerald? And why is the HOA so hell-bent on keeping me out of the loop? He lowered his gaze, the slightest crack in his facade. There are plans. Bigger plans. They want to develop the lake. What do you mean? I pressed, leaning in closer. What plans? Before he could answer, the sound of a car engine roared to life in the distance. We turned to see Richard Wilkins and two other figures emerging from a sleek SUV, headlights cutting through the lingering twilight. They were headed straight toward us. Looks like you're in deeper than you thought, I said with a cold smile, feeling both anger and satisfaction bubble up. You'd better come up with some answers. What's the HOA planning? But Gerald's eyes only widened as he took a step back, panic flashing across his face. You don't want to get involved, believe me. Too late for that. I shot back just as Richard's voice rang out, dripping with condescension as he called. Well, if it isn't the renegade Sullivan. My fists clenched at my sides as I watched Wilkins swagger over, flanked by two imposing figures who looked more like bouncers than HOA board members. I suggest you leave my property, Richard. I said, standing my ground. This is between us. Oh, but frankly it is not, Richard sneered. You see, we have our arrangements, and you're simply proving to be a nuisance. Gerald stood beside me, visibly sweating. Now hold on, you can't just threaten him. Richard waved it away, a dismissive laugh spilling from his lips. Just a little business, Gerald. You should know your place a lot better. Before I could respond, I saw a glimmer in Richard's hands, something metallic catching the last rays of sunlight. You think you can just intimidate me into submission? I growled, my voice low and dangerous. You have no idea the kind of fight you're bringing on. That's where you're wrong, Jake, Richard said, stepping closer. This is just business. We'll take your boat, the lake, everything, and there's nothing you can do about it. You've already lost. With a snarl of rage, I lunged forward, adrenaline kicking in. Not if I expose you first, I shouted, grabbing the nearest thing, a fallen branch, and brandishing it like a weapon. Gerald stepped back, clearly shocked by my sudden aggression. In the prickly silence that followed, Richard's confident facade slipped. I saw a flicker of something real behind his otherwise cool demeanor, a spark of fear, just as the SUV's headlights swung around and illuminated us. Richard's two companions exchanged glances, their eyes narrowing at my stance. Just walk away, Jake. One of them urged, voice laced with caution. This isn't worth it. But it was worth it. I felt the weight of generations behind me. My grandfather's wisdom, the fights he'd won to protect this lake. Not a chance. I yelled back, ready to go all in. Gerald hesitated, caught between Richard and me like a pawn in a game much bigger than either of us had anticipated. Jake, he spoke slowly, uncertainty creeping into his voice. What if he's right? What if we can smooth things over? I shot him an incredulous glare. Smooth things over? You think that's possible after everything? They don't just want my boat, they want the lake. Richard's bravado crumbled under the glare of the impending storm. Get him, he ordered his companions. We'll deal with this once and for all. Before I could react, one of them lunged at me, and I barely dodged, swinging the branch hard. The thud was satisfying, as I caught one of them on the shin. Gerald gasped, and Richard's eyes flashed with something I couldn't quite read, anger or desperation. In that moment, I knew it was now or never. Hurry! I shouted to Gerald. But even as I yelled, I felt the tug of fate shifting, and everything was about to change. My pulse quickened as I prepared for the onslaught, heart racing, knowing this was only the beginning of a war that had just been ignited. There would be no turning back. The battle for Sullivan Lake was underway, and I would fight until the last drop. With a surge of adrenaline, I swung the branch again, connecting solidly with the bouncer's shoulder. The shock registered in his eyes, giving me a moment advantage. I darted around him, moving toward Richard, my mind racing with possible escape routes. But my feet felt glued to the ground, as if the lake beneath me was pulling me in. "Get him!" Richard shouted, his voice mingling with the frustrated grunts of his goons. I shot a glance at Gerald, who lingered uncertainly behind me. He was clearly torn, caught between fear of Richard and the reality of what was unfolding. "Help me!" I yelled over my shoulder, my heart pounding. I don't know," he stumbled, backing away. "Do you want this place to turn into a resort? Fight with me." In that brief moment of hesitation, Richard lunged forward, closing the distance between us. He had forgotten the branch and charged like a bull ready to gore. I sidestepped quickly, slamming the branch into his thigh as he barreled past, and sent him crashing to the ground. "Now!" I shouted at Gerald. "Get my phone." Gerald hesitated, but the resoluteness of my voice flicked a switch. He dashed back to my cabin just as I felt another presence behind me. I spun around just in time to block a fist aimed at my jaw, but the weight of the second goon knocked me to the ground. The breath escaped my lungs as I fell onto the grass, but the fight wasn't over. Rolling sideways, I managed to spin around, looking up just as I caught the glint of a metal object in Richard's hand. A wrench. "You have no idea what you've started," he snarled, revealing the depths of desperation. "This is about more than just land. It's about money and power." "Not about power. It was never about that." I shot back, fueled by indignation. "You've been lying to your community. Gerald's been in over his head. And you think you're going to intimidate me into giving up my inheritance? You think the lake is a game." Before he could respond, Gerald reappeared, holding my phone high. "Jake, I got it. The camera. Let's record this." Richard flinched, eyes darting between the phone and me. "You wouldn't dare," he hissed. "Watch me," I retorted, scrambling to my feet as the adrenaline coursed through my veins. Gerald, albeit still wary, joined me just as Richard lunged once again. "Stay back," I yelled, raising the branch of the fence while Gerald quickly hit the record button. The camera's red light flickered angrily. Gerald pointed it steady at Richard, the tension palpable. "This was never just about you." Richard spat through gritted teeth. "I wanted the lake, yes, but I also wanted for the community, for all of us to thrive. We need development." I sneered, utterly unconvinced. "You mean you need development? This has nothing to do with the people who live here. This is all your greed talking." "Shut him up." Richard barked at his henchmen as they regrouped, looking increasingly uncomfortable about the direction this was going. But I wasn't done. I found strength in the fight, my resolve burgeoning. "You think these folks want a luxury resort? They want to preserve the lake. Richard, they want nature, not your overpriced condos masquerading as community growth." Suddenly, a soft rustling from behind caught my attention. I glanced past Richard to see a handful of my neighbors emerging from the tree line. Ray, Linda, a couple of the anglers, their faces a mix of curiosity and concern transformed into determination. "What's going on here?" Ray shouted, stepping forward. "Don't you dare lay a finger on him." Richard's bravado faltered as the witnesses multiplied. "It's not what it looks like," he protested, scrambling for control over a situation spiraling out of his grasp. "Then show us the truth." I urged, voice fierce. I motioned toward Gerald to share the camera. "Record everything, Gerald. Let's see what your HOA has been plotting." The focus shifted. Richard looked back and forth at the gathering crowd, frustration twisting his face. I could see the realization dawning on him. He was losing influence. The people he had sought to manipulate now stood watching, ready to witness his unraveling. "Fine," he spat, angrily discarding the wrench. "But you'll regret this. We have plans. You think this is over? You don't know who you're dealing with." A new energy ignited among the group. "You've done nothing but lie and take advantage of us. We trusted you." Linda shouted back. "We want our lake back, and we want you gone." "Yeah, More voices chimed in, emboldened by the collective outrage building around us. Richard's face reddened, the seeds of fear he had sown beginning to sprout. You don't understand the stakes. There's too much at risk here. You're just a bunch of naive fools playing with fire. I felt that fire ignite even stronger within me. And you're nothing but a charlatan hiding behind empty promises. It doesn't matter who you think you are anymore. With a final push, I grabbed the phone from Gerald and started broadcasting live, my finger trembling slightly over the screen. This is Jake Sullivan, live from Sullivan Lake. I kept my eyes locked on Richard, who was blinded by fury, no longer the confident manipulator from earlier. We've just exposed the truth about the HOA's intentions. If you want to know what's really happening in Maple Creek Estates, tune in. The comments flooded in almost instantly, questions and outrage echoing through the digital ether. Richard glared at me, realization pouring down his face. Stop this. You have no idea what you're doing, he shouted, backing away, the confidence now entirely stripped away. Well then, how about we let the truth speak for itself? I challenged as I leaned forward, energized, my fingers still pressing record. Why don't we show everyone precisely what you've been planning behind their backs? Caught in the spotlight, Richard faltered, forced to reckon with the community he believed had been his prey. The unity of the neighbors, set against his fabrications and deception, was a sight to behold. The tide had fully turned. Enough! You'll regret this, he shrieked, turning to flee into the darkness as the group began to close ranks. Not so fast, Ray said, stepping forward to block his exit. We're not letting you get away so easily. The tension hung thick in the air, charged with retribution, and a hint of fear flickering in Richard's eyes. He was a cornered man with nowhere left to go, and the crowd had gone wild. Everyone sharing their experiences, their grievances, the very lies they had swallowed for years. Goodbye, Richard. You've lost, I declared, holding my phone high as the crowd erupted into applause, a collective roar that reverberated through a quiet night. As the realization of defeat washed over him fully, Richard turned his back on the community he'd tried to manipulate and sprinted toward the safety of the darkened tree line, a figure of shame receding into the depths of his own hubris. This is just the beginning, he shouted one last time, his voice echoing against the water's stillness. But the power had shifted, stories of deception bursting forth behind him as the neighbors rallied around a newfound camaraderie that lit the night. Together, we had taken a stand, not just for the lake, but for the integrity of a community built on trust, respect, and preservation. I turned my gaze toward Sullivan Lake, feeling a warmth bubble up inside me that I hadn't expected. We did it, Gerald exclaimed, his voice brimming with disbelief and relief. I can't believe we did it. Yeah, I replied, a grin breaking through my earlier resolve. Now, let's make sure they know the fight isn't just about this. I gestured at the shimmering expanse of water. It's about keeping this place a sanctuary, a testament to what my grandfather fought for. And in that moment, standing side by side with my neighbors, my phone still broadcasting, I realized that the battle had only just begun, but we were no longer alone. Our victory was just the first crack in the facade of power. We were ready for whatever came next, determined to protect not just a lake, but the spirit of community that flowed around it, a force far more powerful than any development scheme could destroy. In the distance, the first stars blinked into existence, shining brightly against the darkening sky, reflecting our triumph and the promise of the future we would build together.